Hi guys, my name is Malcolm and I am a student in BIOS 3010 or Human Anatomy. And this is my video recording of my final project. Now my goal for this final project is to have two different resources for you to do different exercises to help with your health, your strength, and overall well-being. The first portion of this project is going to be this video recording series. Here, I will go over 20 different exercises that strengthen as many muscles, and not only just as many muscles, but some of the more important or neglected muscles in the body, and have it as a video bank for you to reference, try out, and compare with other exercises to see what fits best with you. The second portion of this project will be the attached research documents, histology slides, origin and insertion information, and any other more clinical or technical information involving the different muscle groups utilized during this project as another bank of information for you to reference, to look into, to maybe spark some creativity or research on your own that might benefit you in your well-being. And finally, at the end, I will introduce an invention that may be out there to help with clinical populations and those in need to help with our general health and well-being. All right, thanks guys, and let's get on to our first exercise. Hey guys, so today we're going to go over the push-up. Now, the push-up has two major movements involved in this exercise. The first one being shoulder flexion, with your main agonist being your pectoralis major, your anterior deltoid, and your coracobrachialis. But this movement also involves elbow extension, with your main agonist being your triceps brachii. What's also important with the push-up is that it works scapular protraction, with your main muscle agonist being the serratus anterior. Now the serratus anterior is important because having a strong developed serratus anterior prevents the clinical condition of winging scapula, which is your scapula retracting farther and being stuck in that motion. So now we will go over how to properly perform a push-up. Now this push-up is a two-stage movement. It will begin with an eccentric down phase, followed by a concentric up phase. Now what will mark the transition point between the eccentric and the concentric phase will be an observed 90-degree elbow flexion by an observer of this exercise. So from a front view, as you go into the exercise, you will have your hands about or slightly wider than shoulder width apart. Your feet will be no more than 10 inches apart or slightly less than shoulder width apart. This is the starting position. This is the up position. As we go down, this is the eccentric phase. You'll go down till you reach 90-degree elbow flexion and then come up in the concentric phase. That will be one repetition. From a lateral viewpoint, again, you can see my feet no more than 10 inches apart, my hands slightly under my shoulder, and you will also notice that I am engaging my core, predominantly my transverse abdominis, to keep a flat plank pattern. Again, you will go down eccentrically till you reach a 90-degree elbow flexion, and then come up concentrically until you begin in the starting position again. All right, thank you guys. We have gone over the push-up, and let's go. All right, hey guys, today we're going to go over the crunch or the sit-up. Now the movement of a crunch or sit-up is trunk flexion. So your main agonist muscle is going to be your rectus abdominis, also known as your six-pack muscle. You will also receive the movement from your internal and external obliques, as their secondary action is trunk flexion when bilaterally contracted. Now to start, before you do this movement, you will lay down onto the ground on your back, and your fingertips will go onto your collarbones, and they will remain there for the duration of the movement. Then you will bring your legs up, keeping your feet on the ground until you are at 90-degree knee flexion. From there, you may choose to have either another individual or a piece of equipment hold your feet down for this exercise. To perform the exercise, you will flex your trunk upwards until your elbow connects somewhere in between your hip flexor or the inferior part of your quadricep muscle on the anterior part of your femur. So to begin this exercise, we have our fingertips on our collarbones, our knees are at 90-degree flexion, and in this case, we have a piece of equipment holding my feet down. So to start, I will flex my trunk up, my elbows will touch, in this case, about the middle part of my quadricep, and then I will curl my back down. What I do not want to do is come up and then slam my back down. Not only will this take a lot of energy out of you when performing this for a exercise testing sense, but it also may cause injury. So you will come up and then you will want to curl back down in a controlled manner and then come back up. Also, another piece for when it comes to scoring is that in order for it to be considered coming back down, your scapula and your shoulder blades must touch the ground before you can begin another repetition. So you'll go down, scapula and shoulder blades will touch, come back up. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, today we are going to be going over external rotation of the shoulder joint. Now your main muscle agonist of external rotation in the shoulder joint is going to be your infraspinatus and your teres minor. These muscles are important because they are two of the four components of what is called your rotator cuff. Now clinically in our population, there are a lot of issues with either tight or weak rotator cuffs, and that is an issue because the rotator cuff provides stability to the already very mobile glenohumeral joint, which is known for dislocations. So by strengthening these muscles, we can help prevent clinical issues and injuries. Now to start with external rotation of the shoulder joint, I like to keep my elbow pinned against the upper part of my iliac crest, or what is the top part of your hip bone, as a landmark to keep it stable so I can keep tension on my external rotation muscles. In this case, we will be using a cable. Some other options to do this movement would be either a resistance band or a lighter dumbbell or other type of free weight, but in this case we'll be using a cable. So we will start with my elbow pinned against my iliac crest, and I will start in this internally rotated position, and there I will feel the resistance as I externally rotate my shoulder concentrically, and then I will internally rotate my shoulder, keeping tension on the infraspinatus and teres minor as I internally rotate with eccentric contraction in my external rotation muscles. So again, you will start internally rotated and you will rotate your shoulder externally, keeping your elbow in a stable position, and then eccentrically come back to the internally rotated position. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, our next exercise we're going to be going over is a lateral raise. Now what a lateral raise is shoulder abduction or abduction. Now your main muscle agonists for shoulder abduction are going to be your deltoids, specifically your middle and posterior deltoids, and other muscle agonists will include your upper pectoralis major and your supraspinatus muscle. Now, the importance of this exercise can be seen in both working the deltoids, as those provide stability for larger compound movements such as the bench press or overhead press, but mainly this movement is important for your supraspinatus, which is one of the four components of your rotator cuff. Now, clinically, as stated before with shoulder internal and external rotation, the rotator cuff is typically weak in our population, which can cause clinical issues such as dislocations. So to begin this exercise, you will first choose your equipment. In this case here, we will be using a cable. Some other options for this movement include resistance bands or free weights such as dumbbells. So to begin this movement, we're going to grab a hold of our weight with the shoulder that you choose, and we will start in this more medial position of our hand in line with our midline. Then what we're going to do is laterally raise our shoulder we're going to work those muscles concentrically, and then we will eccentrically lower our shoulder to where our hand is back in that medial position. Again, we will laterally raise concentrically, and then we will lower eccentrically back to a medial position. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're going to go over today is going to be internal rotation of the shoulder. Now, your two largest muscle agonists of internal rotation of the shoulder are going to be your pectoralis major and your latissimus dorsi. However, there are two smaller muscle agonists known as your subscapularis and your teres major. Now, this motion is important specifically for working the subscapularis, which is one out of four components of what is called your rotator cuff. Now, clinically, we see a weaker rotator cuff in the majority of the population, which can cause clinical issues such as glenohumeral dislocation, as the rotator cuff is responsible for stability of the glenohumeral joint. Now, to begin this exercise, I like to keep my elbow of the shoulder that I will be working planted on my iliac crest, which is the top part of my hip bone, to keep that stable. Then we will use our selected equipment. In this case, it will be a cable. Another equipment to use will be a resistance band. So to start, we will grab our equipment. We will plant our elbow onto our iliac crest. We will start in this externally rotated position. From here, we will then internally rotate our shoulder concentrically, and then we will externally rotate our shoulder eccentrically using the same muscle agonist. So again, we will concentrically internally rotate and then eccentrically externally rotate. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, our next exercise is going to be side trunk lateral raises. Now the main movement of this is going to be trunk lateral flexion. So to break that down, trunk is going to be our midsection, both anteriorly and posteriorly. Lateral is going to be to the side, and flexion is going to be flexing the side that we will be going towards. Now your main muscle agonists for this movement are going to be your quadris lumborum muscle posteriorly in the lower part of your back. Then you will also be working your internal and external obliques. Now, when it comes to your internal and external obliques, you will be unilaterally contracting these muscles. Now, when it comes to the internal obliques, this will be an ipsilateral contraction. And for the external obliques, it'll be a contralateral contraction. As in, for your internal obliques, if you are flexing to the right side, you'll be working your right internal oblique, and then contralaterally, you'll be working your left external oblique. So the way we're going to perform this exercise is by choosing our equipment. In this case, I'll be using a dumbbell. Some other options include kettlebells or any other free weights. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to start in this neutral spine position with our weight on one side, and then we will then laterally flex our trunk down and then bring it back up. So again, we're going to flex downwards. We're going to feel that crunch on the inside here, and then we will come back up. Hey guys, today our next exercise is going to be the shoulder press. Now, the main muscle agonists of the shoulder press movement are going to be your anterior deltoid, your upper pectoralis major, and your triceps brachii. Now, the reason why this movement is important is because when it comes to activities of daily living, your anterior deltoid is a heavily used muscle. It is used in shoulder flexion. It is also used in horizontal adduction. So typically what you see in the population is the anterior deltoid is very developed, but it can still be benefited through strengthening. So the way we're going to strengthen this muscle is a shoulder press. Now, in my variation, I'll be using a dumbbell and doing this movement in a single arm unilateral fashion. Some other ways you can do this are with a barbell in a bilateral fashion, but today we will be using a dumbbell. So the way you're going to start this off is you're going to get the weight on top, just above your shoulder. You're going to stack your wrists under your elbow, and then the concentric phase, you're going to press up over your head, and on the eccentric phase, you're going to come back down and either come close to or touch your anterior deltoid. So again, you're going to press up concentrically and lower back down eccentrically. Now, another thing with this movement too is it also works scapular upward rotation, which the main muscle agonist is your serratus anterior. So this is another exercise that helps benefit and strengthen the serratus anterior. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is the chin up. Now, the chin up involves 3 movements. There's going to be scapular retraction, there's going to be shoulder extension, and there's going to be elbow flexion. Now, for scapular retraction, this will work your middle trapezius and your rhomboids, and this will be held isometrically throughout the exercise. Your main muscle agonists for shoulder extension are going to be your latissimus dorsi, your teres major, and your posterior deltoid. And for elbow flexion, your main muscle agonist will be your biceps brachii. Now, the way we're going to do this movement is we're going to go up to a bar, and we're going to have our shoulders flexed and raised, and our elbows extended. The first part of the movement, we're going to retract our scapula. Then we're going to pull up and flex our elbow and extend our shoulder concentrically, and then come back down. Again, so we will be doing shoulder extension and elbow flexion at the same time to pull ourselves up. So we will retract our scapula to stabilize. Then we will come up eccentrically and then down concentrically. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is called the Pushup Plus. Now, the main muscle agonists of the Pushup Plus are gonna be your serratus anterior and your pectoralis minor. Now, what a Pushup Plus is just a weighted form of scapular protraction. Now, this is an important exercise because it works mainly the serratus anterior, which having a strong serratus anterior can help prevent the clinical condition of winging scapula, where your scapula becomes depressed backwards and can sometimes separate at the the scapulothoracic joint. Now, the way we're going to do this exercise is we're going to get up in a push-up position, and we're going to hold this high plank here, and then we're going to protract our scapula upwards and then bring it back down to neutral. Again, it's a very slight movement, but you will protract your scapula upwards and then bring it back down to neutral. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna do is the forearm plank. Now, the main muscle agonist of the forearm plank is going to be your transverse abdominis, with secondary agonists being your rectus abdominis, external obliques, and internal obliques. Now, this muscle, the transverse abdominis, along with this movement in the plank, are very important because your transverse abdominis acts like a weightlifting belt. As in, when it contracts, it holds pressure in the abdominal cavity under load. So, the exercise we're going to do is going to be the plank. So we're going to start by coming down onto our elbows and pushing our feet out. Now, this is the exercise. We're going to hold a stable position from our shoulders all the way to our feet. We don't want our rear end coming up or our front end sagging down. We want a stable position to hold right here. This will work our transverse abdominis along with the rectus abdominis, the internal obliques, and external obliques. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, today our next exercise is going to be the single arm face pull. Your main muscle agonists for the single arm face pull are going to be your posterior deltoid, your middle trapezius, and your rhomboids. Clinically, this exercise is important because what we see typically in older patients is more developed muscular mass on the anterior portion of their body than the posterior portion of their body. This can lead to some issues such as hunching in with older age. So by developing, especially the posterior part of the shoulders and upper back, this can help with posture and prevent hunching over with old age. So the way we're going to do this movement is I am selecting a cable, and we're going to select a lower weight as this is a smaller muscle group, and we will hold our elbow out laterally with the cable being in line with our shoulder. We're going to take a step back so our arm starts straight, and then we're going to concentrically squeeze the posterior deltoid and then eccentrically stretch the posterior deltoid. Again, we're going to come back, we're going to pull and squeeze the posterior deltoid and then go forward and stretch eccentrically. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're going to do is the tricep pushdown. The main muscle agonists of a tricep pushdown are going to be all three heads of your tricep brachii, being the lateral head, the long head, and the medial head, along with some minor assistance from your anconeus muscle. So the way we're going to perform this exercise, in this case using a cable, is we will start in an eccentric tricep position of a flexed elbow. From here, we will extend the elbow concentrically, getting a squeeze in the tricep on the bottom, and then we will flex the elbow eccentrically. Again, we're going to extend the elbow concentrically, and then we will flex the elbow eccentrically. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're going to go over today is the bicep curl. Now your main muscle agonist for a bicep curl is going to be dependent on the angle of your hand when you do this movement. If you do this movement with a supinated grip, then your main muscle agonist will be your bicep brachii. If you do this movement with a neutral grip, in the sense of a hammer curl, your main muscle agonist will be your brachioradialis. And if you do this movement in a pronated grip, your main muscle agonist will be your bicep brachialis. In this case today, we will be doing it with a supinated grip targeting our biceps brachii. So to start this movement, you will select your equipment. In this case, I'll be using a dumbbell. You will grab the weight and your chosen grip, in this case supinated, and you will start with your elbow extended. From here, you will concentrically flex your elbow till you feel a squeeze on the top, and then you will eccentrically extend your elbow on the way down. Again, you will concentrically flex your elbow and eccentrically extend your elbow. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, before we get into the lower body portion of this final project, I would like to begin with a movement analysis of the two major joints that we will be discussing in lower body movements. And those two joints will be the hip joint and the knee joint. Now, both the hip and the knee joint are able to perform two different actions each, being flexion and extension, for us to have four different movements that we will be discussing mainly in the lower body, being hip flexion, knee flexion, hip extension, and knee extension. Now, additionally, with these joints and actions, I would like to discuss the major muscle agonists of each movement and get into the nomenclature and more commonly known names that we will be referring to during these upcoming exercises. Now, I'd like to begin with hip extension. As you can see, with hip extension, we have the gluteus maximus as a muscle agonist, but you can see here we have a group of four different muscles all grouped together. We have the biceps femoris, which are two different muscles. We have the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. All of these four muscles here, biceps femoris times 2, semitendinous, and semimembranosus, are more commonly known as the hamstring muscles. Now, the hamstring muscles are the muscle agonists for both hip extension and knee flexion. So from here on out, these four muscles here, the biceps femoris, tendinosus, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, will be referred to as the hamstrings. And additionally, any actions of this muscle will also be paired with the joint. So we will say hamstrings performing hip extension or hamstrings performing knee flexion. Next, I would like to come over here to knee extension. As you can see, there are four different muscles that perform knee extension, and those will be the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, the vastus medialis, and the vastus intermedius. Those four muscles together perform knee extension and are more commonly referred to as the quadriceps or the quads. So again, if I refer to quadriceps in this project, I am talking about these four muscles. Now, I would also like to give your attention to the rectus femoris, because you can also see up here that the rectus femoris also performs hip flexion. And that is because the rectus femoris crosses two joints. It crosses the knee joint, but is also the only quadricep muscle that also crosses the hip joint. And it crosses the hip joint anteriorly, meaning it has the ability to perform hip flexion. Now, in addition to the rectus femoris, there is another muscle called the iliopsoas, deep into your pelvis, but still anterior. And the rectus femoris and the iliopsoas together are more commonly referred to as hip flexors. So if I refer to hip flexors, I am referring to the iliopsoas and the rectus femoris, specifically in hip flexion. And if I'm referring to the quadriceps, I'm referring to the rectus femoris and knee extension, additionally with the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius. All right, thanks guys, and let's get into some exercises. All right, hey guys, the first leg movement that we are going to be doing is the squat. Now the squat has two phases. It has an eccentric down phase of hip and knee flexion simultaneously, and it has a concentric up phase with knee extension and hip extension simultaneously. Now the main muscle agonists for the hip extension and the concentric phase are going to be the gluteus maximus and the hamstrings, and the main muscle agonists for the knee extension in the concentric up phase are going to be your quadriceps. Now, the way we'll perform this movement is we will choose our equipment. In this case, I'm using a Smith machine. Now, there are plenty of other variants, including a barbell squat, front squat, goblet squat, and many, many others. But today, we'll be using the Smith machine. The way you will do this is you will retract your scapula to create a base of support where the bar will go. It will sit on your upper traps and onto your shoulders. Your feet will be approximately shoulder width apart, and you will lift the bar up. From here, you will eccentrically squat down into hip flexion and knee flexion, and you will concentrically push up into knee extension and hip extension. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is another variation and or substitute of the squat, which is the seated leg press. Now the benefit of a seated leg press versus a standard back squat is because you are seated, your back is supported through a backrest and your hips are supported through a chair, which reduces the stability requirements needed on your trunk and spine and your hips. Now, this can be beneficial for someone either with back stability issues that still wants to exercise their lower body, but it also means that you can load this exercise a bit heavier than you would a back squat if that is the alternative that you are seeking. Now, again, as the same as the back squat, you are going to have two different movements, eccentrically being knee flexion and hip flexion, and in the up phase, you will be concentrically extending the knee and extending the hip. So the way we'll perform this exercise is you will be seated in the chair. Your back will be supported by the backrest, hips supported by the bottom of the chair, and you will place your feet in a comfortable position. For me specifically, given the limitations of this equipment, my feet are going to be a little bit higher than they typically would be. So the way you will begin is you will start in this up phase, then in the down phase, you will eccentrically flex your knee. You will eccentrically flex your knee and flex your hip, and then you will concentrically extend your knee, extend your hip. Now again, you will eccentrically flex your knee via the quadriceps, and you will eccentrically flex your hip via the hamstrings and gluteus maximus. And then in the upwards concentric phase, you will concentrically extend your knee via the quadriceps and concentrically extend your hip via the hamstrings and gluteus maximus. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is the seated calf raise. Now your calves are comprised of two different muscles, your gastrocnemius and your soleus muscles. Now the calves are responsible for, in this case, plantar flexion, so the extension of the ankle from the anterior part, along with active stability in the ankle and foot during activities of daily living, such as walking. Now, the way we're going to perform this movement is on the leg press. We will start by pushing into the starting position up with full extension of the knee. We will start the movement by eccentrically going into dorsiflexion and then concentrically going into plantar flexion. So again, we will be going eccentrically into dorsiflexion and then concentrically into plantar flexion. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is hip abduction. Now, your main muscle agonists for hip abduction are going to be your gluteus medius and your gluteus minimus. Now, the reason why this is an important exercise is because it targets your gluteus medius, which is one of the most important muscles when it comes to stability in activities of daily living, such as walking. And by strengthening your gluteus medius, you can help preserve your ability to move and walk throughout your lifespan. Now, the way we will perform this movement is by choosing our equipment. In this case, I will be using a cable. Another option to use would be a resistance band. And you will start in this neutral position with both feet shoulder width apart. You will then, if you choose to, hold on to a bar for stability, and then you will concentrically abduct your hip laterally, and then eccentrically adduct your hip back to your neutral position. Again, you will concentrically adduct your hip laterally, and then eccentrically adduct your hip back to the neutral position. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is going to be hip adduction. Now this will be the opposite movement to hip abduction, where we'll be starting in a lateral position of the hip and then moving immediately back into the midline. So the main muscle agonists for this movement are going to be your adductor magnus, adductor longus, and adductor brevis. Now, the way we're going to begin this movement is we're going to find some sort of brace or ability for support. We will start by eccentrically abducting our hip out laterally to where we will then concentrically adduct our hip back into a neutral position. Again, we will start eccentrically abducted out laterally, and then we will then adduct our hip back immediately. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is the leg extension. Now, the leg extension is a way to isolate your quadricep muscles and isolating knee extension. So there are multiple different machines that can isolate this movement, mainly a leg extension machine. However, in today's case, we are going to be using a cable and a bench to unilaterally do this movement. So you will start with the weight around your ankle in a knee flexion position. You will then concentrically extend your knee anteriorly, and then you will eccentrically flex your knee. So again, you will concentrically extend your knee, and then you will eccentrically flex your knee. All right, thanks guys. All right, hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is going to be the leg curl. Now what a leg curl is really just knee flexion isolating the hamstring muscle group. Typically in a gym, you will find a machine where you would do this movement bilaterally, flexing both knees at the same time, targeting both hamstring groups, and then eccentrically stretching as you extend the knee. However, in this case, we are going to be using a bench and a cable variation that is popular in physical therapy and rehabilitation practices. So in this case, it will be a unilateral movement, and we will start in a knee extended position with our hamstrings eccentrically stretched. We will then flex our knee concentrically, squeezing our hamstrings, and then we will eccentrically extend our knee, stretching the hamstrings. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, the next exercise we're gonna go over is actually going to be a stretch for our hip flexor muscles. Now just a reminder, our hip flexor muscles are going to be our rectus femoris and our iliopsoas muscles that will be primarily responsible for hip flexion. Now the reason why we would want to stretch our hip flexors is to prevent a condition called anterior pelvic tilt. Now what anterior pelvic tilt is, it's a result of typically tight hip flexors from sitting down all day as we do for work or for leisure in our culture. And what that does is the tight hip flexor muscles pull the superior and anterior part of our our pelvis forward in a tilt. And what that does is it can cause lower back pain by our lumbar spine going to extension, and additionally it can prevent imbalances in actions such as squats, walking, or other activities of daily living. Now in this crazy contraption here, we're going to find a way to isolate and stretch our hip flexors. Now optimally this can be done with just a foam roller placed under the pelvis, but with the equipment we have here, we have this crazy contraption set up. So the way we're going to start is by placing our pelvis in an elevated position up. From here, we will then lean back into this position, keep our pelvis up. From here, as you can see, my legs, gravity wants to pull my hips into extension, but in turn that's also anteriorly tilting my pelvis forward. So the way we'll prevent that is by one, bracing our core, and two, bringing one leg up and holding on. What this will do is this will keep my pelvis and my lumbar spine in a neutral position, while gravity then attempts to extend my leg, which eccentrically stretches my hip flexors. Now, another way to target the hip flexors even more is to flex the knee slightly, as this prevents the concentric contraction of the rectus femoris, as it does also extend the knee. By allowing the knee to go into flexion, it allows gravity to pull the leg down, in this case, which would be hip extension, which concentrically stretches our hip flexor. Now we will hold this for 10 seconds on one side, and then we will come up, switch legs, and then do the second side for another 10 seconds so that we feel that stretch in our hip flexor muscles. All right, thanks guys. Hey guys, we have now come to the conclusion of my filming portion of my human anatomy final project. Now before we wrap this up, I would like to give a thank you to Professor Clevidence for allowing me the ability to use this filming equipment and this facility here in Grover Center to film my final project. Additionally, I'd like to give a thank you to Professor Barr in his kinesiology class for helping me understand movement analysis and the way our muscle groups work together throughout the body. And finally, I'd like to give a thank you to Professor Klein for his anatomy lab and lecture class and helping us understand the human body system better and how we can apply it to our future jobs throughout the world. From here, I would like to direct your attention to the description of this video along with the Turnitin link in Blackboard, where you will find different aspects of this final project, such as clinical research, world considerations, an invention I've come up with, and any other parts of this project that have been missing throughout this video series. All right, thanks guys and have a good day. Now the way we're going to stretch the hip flexor muscles is by targeting them through specific movements. And the way we're going to do that is start by lowering ourselves onto the ground, and we will take some sort of soft elevated pad. This can also be done with a foam roller, and we will place these under our hips as we lay down on our back. That's not going to work at all. Ugh. No. Hey guys, the next movement that we're going to go over are calf raises, in this case a seated position. Now your calves are comprised of two muscles, your gastrocnemius and your splenius. No, I don't know the calf muscles.